Okay, brilliant. So thank you to those who have joined. I see we only have a few people, but that's still brilliant. You're committed to the bar, which is fantastic to see. I will pop in the chat now a link from your university that should be able to allow you to register your attendance for this evening, which is great. So this is the final instalment of my presentations with the University of Warwick, and this is focusing on pupillage applications. Hopefully you remember me from the first and second part on becoming a barrister and Inns of Court and scholarships, but I'm Sophie Stevens. I'm the Future Pupil Programme Coordinator at the University of Law, and in essence I'm also a previous BPC student who has a criminal pupillage starting in October 2022. So I went through the pupillage process last year, and I actually had a go at it the year before as well, so I know exactly what it feels like to make applications for pupillage, and I also know how it feels to be interviewed for pupillage. So hopefully this will help you think about how to approach them and how you basically get through the process of making pupillage applications. By way of quick recap, if you're a non-law graduate, you will need to complete a PGDL or an MA Law conversion course before coming onto the bar practice course. If you have done a law degree on your third year of your LLB, you're able to join an Inn of Court and then move straight onto the bar practice course. Hopefully we've touched upon that numerous times already now, so you're familiar with that. And then once you complete the BPC, you'll be called to the bar. And then finally, the final phase of your training from unregistered to registered barrister will be your pupillage year. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, how you get that, what that looks like. And then obviously you will make an application for tenancy after you've completed your pupillage. And then obviously at that point, you'll be a registered barrister. So I've left these on there because it's important to note what the dates usually are. So obviously the now needs a bit changing. Apologies, I should have pulled that off, but you can see the Pupillage Gateway timetable. It opens every year for browsing, so sort of 25th of November onwards. And you have from basically November through till February to read the questions from chambers and get those applications submitted. So what I always recommend people do is, if you're not looking to apply for pupillage that year, but you want to get clued up on how it works and who are sort of employing, then definitely still have a look at the gateway. You can register for a gateway account without actually putting in any application. So you can still see the sort of questions they ask. You can still get familiar with what chambers are recruiting and what sort of questions they do usually require. And that enables you to get a bit ahead of the game. The timetable doesn't really vary much year on year. So although these dates are for the year, the cohort just gone, you can obviously cross apply them a little bit to this coming year as well. It's pretty much always November through till February to do the applications, interviews through February to May. So that's how that works. And as I've said before, I think in part one of this series, the offer date is now always the 6th of May. So you won't hear back from chambers at whatever phase until that day and after that time. So it's really important when you go into this to not sort of worry about what you think is the ideal candidate. So I went into this sort of worried that I had an undergraduate in history, that I had never had straight A's at GCSE and A level. I'd done mooting, but I hadn't got any sort of big wins or anything like that. And I didn't have major ties to the profession. And I struggled heavily with written communication due to being dyslexic. So the pupillage applications in themselves sort of terrified me, because I was like, I'm now going to be judged on the one thing that I hate doing. I did have good mini pupillages, which I would recommend anyone getting for pupillage applications because they give you something to talk off. But what I'm trying to prove here is that the ideal candidate isn't always what you think. I thought I was not going to fare too well, but I actually ended up with 4 first round interviews, 3 second round interviews, and a pupillage offer pretty much the first year I applied. So it's not impossible. You don't have to have a double first from Cambridge or Oxford, and you don't need to have an LLM from Harvard in order to get it with tons and tons of prizes and awards. But you do need to have determination and sort of the willingness to give a lot of time to these applications and make sure that you proofread on a really really intense scale. I don't think I read myself and repeated myself like in my own head so much through this process, but that's what it required of me, and that's what I did. So this is just a short reminder that the ideal candidate isn't always what you think, and believe and utilize what you do have on your CV, because that's going to be the thing that you're going to have to shape and persuade them on and why they want you. So if you do have things on your application that are pretty much prerequisites to applying for pupillage, things like no mooting, no minis, no sort of legal work experience, then you need to be realistic with yourself and identify those gaps in your application right from the very start. And you do need to make a plan to fill them. So when I came onto the BPC, I'd only done one moot. I wanted to be a criminal barrister. Mooting is a fantastic way of proving your ability as an advocate. So I was told very early on in a careers appointment, you need to fill those gaps on mooting. You need to go and do more moots. And so I set out on a quest to do more negotiation competitions, mediation competitions, mooting, everything to try and show that I was a good advocate. And then once you've filled those gaps, that's the story you have, that's your journey to the bar, and you need to make that story shine. So don't start lying or putting things in there that just aren't true, or fabrications of the truth, because chambers will know. So it's better to just take at face value the story you have, the experiences you've had, and make that story the one that convinces them to give you pupillage. With that, you have to have a little bit of hard work put in there, like everything at the bar, and then obviously a bit of luck. I would say I got very lucky. I think most people who speak to about pupillage, who get pupillage, will always say, I feel very lucky, I'm very fortunate. And you just have to have that belief that, you know, this isn't going to be a problem. I very much went into it, you know, despite seeing the statistics, those sort of things, with the belief that, you know, no, I'm going to get pupillage. This isn't going to be a problem. This isn't going to be the biggest hurdle for me, and I'm going to do this. And with that sort of mentality, I think I sort of attacked it with real fighting spirit, and I stand by that. And I would, you know, give other people similar advice. So what are you going to do throughout these applications? Well, you're actually going to play the part of a barrister, and you are going to be the client. So you're going to tell them all the reasons why they should take you on. You basically have to tell them everything about yourself, but all the strongest points first, and base that on evidence. So it's important that you're persuasive from the get-go. So you're not just, and the way you do that is by giving them evidence. So it's not just saying, I'm good at this. It's saying, I'm good at this, and I've proved that by doing this. So a really good example is, I could just say, I'm a fantastic advocate. Anyone can say they're a fantastic advocate, but how I persuade them I'm a fantastic advocate is by telling them that I competed in the CEDR national negotiation competition, and I ranked in the top 10 of the entire country, and that did it. Now, that's not me saying you have to have things like that on your CV, but you do need to have a couple of unique selling points that help persuade them why you are best for their chambers. And throughout this entire thing, every question you answer, you're pretty much telling them why you're the right candidate for them and why you should be offered the pupillage. So with that in mind, the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to select your chambers, and everything with pupillage starts with a good Google. So I actually Googled very early on every chambers that pretty much had crime in their name and that offered crime. And I took that as my first sort of preliminary sift of where I wanted to apply to. Now, the investigation part, the selecting chambers and figuring out who they are and what they do is really important, because you're not going to have time to apply everywhere. I started with a list of about 30 chambers, and I ended up making applications to around 16. So it's really important that you are able to refine and you're able to choose where your strongest applications are going to be. So how do you do that? Well, you use the Gateway search tool. It's really great for identifying sets in which area of the country that you want to practice in, and the areas of practice they're actually offering pupillage in. So one thing to remember is, although a chambers might offer crime and extradition, their pupillage might be solely crime. So if it's extradition work you want to do, then that's not going to be the set for you. So it's important that you understand what the set is offering a pupillage in, and whether that's in the area you are wanting to practice in. If they don't offer it in the area you're wanting to practice in, don't then go and make a case for that area and why they could maybe offer you a pupillage in that. No, if they're offering a criminal pupillage and you want to do a specialist human rights one, don't bother applying there, because they won't look at your application if you're going to make a case for human rights and not crime. Use it to identify the sets plus the other chambers that you will apply outside of the gateway. So what do I mean by this? Well, on the gateway is where everywhere has to advertise that they're taking applications for pupillage. However, not every single set has to recruit through the gateway. So that means you don't have every set in the country putting all their questions on gateway and you filling out the application on there. Some sets, for example, my chambers, they advertised that they were recruiting for 3 pupillages. And then what happened then was I clicked on their website link that was on Gateway, and I sent them a CV and covering letter to an email address specified. So although they advertised on the Gateway, they didn't recruit through the Gateway. And why I'm telling you this is because the off Gateway sets that want you to do sort of a separate application for them or a CV and a covering letter, they tend to take a lot longer than the pre-filled out sort of Pupillage Gateway online application system that you can do. So definitely bear that in mind. I note we have a question. Hopefully you should be able to assess the recordings, access these. I've sent them to your team at Warwick, and I will chase up on it again for you to check that you are able to get a hold of them at some point. You do also need to create a good spreadsheet of your choices. So start with a really long list like I did, and then do your research and narrow them down. And I think, yeah, I've got a picture of this here, but we'll come back to it in a second, and I'll explain that and talk you through that in a minute. Now, part of this research is going to be done on chambers' websites, and that's because you don't have time to basically shadow every chambers in the country that you're going to apply for. An interesting thing I would say to you is that although I did minis at a lot of sets, I didn't actually interview for first round at a lot of sets that I did minis at. The mini pupillage was a great experience, but clearly wasn't enough to get me through to the seat. So what I would say is the pupillage that I received actually is at a chambers that I only ever met in their pupillage evening online. I never did a mini with them. The first time I met them was interviews for pupillage. So it is possible to get it from just doing research on chambers websites and making sure you follow what they're up to. What you are going to do is do what we call here at ULaw the baby junior test. And that's looking at the most recent tenants, so sort of people who have been called to the bar maybe 4 to 5 years ago, looking at their background, the university they attended, the work experience they gained, their grades, things like that, looking at the work that they're currently doing now and seeing how you fare against that. Do you have similar, credentials to them? And what I would say by this is, why do I ask people to do this? Well, it's because sometimes there will come a crunch time where you have to decide between 2 chambers applications going in, and you want to make an application at the one that you seem best fitted to, because that's going to be your best shot at pupillage at the end of the day. So it is about being realistic, and it is about really thinking about where your best chances are. What kind of work are they doing now is important. I had a barrister tell me very early on that because I'm interested in rape and serious sexual offences, I'd done my master's thesis on RASO, as it's abbreviated to, and I said, I'm really interested in that area, and they said, that's fantastic, but you won't be doing that until you're sort of 10-15 years into practice. So what about the junior bar are you interested in? So it's really important that you understand what the junior end is doing in chambers and what about it interests you. And one thing with my future chambers that interested me was that they do a lot of youth crime, something I'm very interested in, specifically to look at sort of disabilities and people with neurodivergent conditions like myself and how they gain access to justice. So that was a good fit for me. So it's definitely about finding what you're interested in. It's also about finding out about chambers' cultures, values and ethos. Again, another big thing for me was very much where supports individuals with dyslexia. Would they be open to assisting me in that, so sort of giving me longer with papers and things like that. So I often challenged them in interviews, sort of, what do you do to support neurodivergent individuals, and do you have a good relationship, things like that, to try and find out what their cultures and their values and their ethoses were. I mean, you can also find a lot of that on there online, and there'll be different things that are important to you, but I'm just giving you active examples because I know with pupillage a lot of general advice comes out but no one really gives specifics, so it's easier for me from experience to tell you what I did. And then prioritize, the length of the application form. There were a couple that I literally went, that's too long, it's too complicated, I don't like it, I'm not going to do it. And a lot of people will say, you know, it's so competitive, don't do that. But if I'm not going to be able to sit down and do well in the paper application, then I've pretty much wasted my time and theirs. So definitely think about the time that's required in giving when you're putting in those applications. And yeah, we've already spoke about the other ones, but those things are going to be what helps you prioritize. And what does this shape up as? Well, this is kind of what it looks like. Mine was very different. Mine had lots and lots of colours on it, and went like red every time I got rejected and green if I got an interview and things like that. But this is the basic format, which I thought I would use so it doesn't confuse anyone. But you've got a range of chambers here. You've got their rank in the second column, so where they are, if they're a band 1 set or a band 3. You've got their practice areas, so are they a mixed, are they regulatory, are they crime? And that's going to be important again to tailoring your application to showing them that you're genuinely interested in their areas. We've got a column on here, are they on or off the gateway, as I spoke about before. Their reward, obviously the deadline's now one straight deadline, so I don't know why they'd have a column for that, but you can do if you want to keep reminding yourself of that, of that. You can also add a column about the award. I definitely did, because I knew I couldn't afford to live in London sort of under 24k. So if the award was less than that, it sort of got ranked as a less priority application for me, because I knew I would struggle living there. Personal connections, yet again, debating societies, mini pupillages, things like that. Have you done any connections with them? Have you been to their online forums? And we've got the baby junior test. So this is what a lot of them have done. So as you can see, for KBW, Exeter, 2-1s, Oxford, Queen Mary, Manchester Met, LSE, Nottingham Trent for 3PB. So you can see the range of people and the sort of profiles they tend to take. And then I always had a notes column where I would jot in anything interesting that I'd noticed online. So sort of any cases that they had done, anything like that, that sort of really did spark my interest. So a good example would be my my future chambers. I put on there, you know, specialist youth work. You got pupillage with specialist youth training, which I like. So that was what that column was used for, but hopefully that's helpful for you all. So once you've compiled your chambers and where you want to apply, the next thing is to look at your evidence that you're going to put into these applications, and that's going to come from your CV. So it's really important that you have a 2-page long, really well refined CV that covers all of the following things here. So you should have your education on there, your scholarships and your awards, your legal experience, so that includes voluntary and mini pupillages, demonstrates insight into the profession. So what that means is you showing a willingness to engage in the profession, you showing that you're genuinely interested in criminal law because you did this voluntary experience with the Crown Court. Non-legal employment, so that is relevant. You'd be surprised how many times I mentioned my work at Reese in Gunwolf Quays, where I worked 4 years as a retail assistant. Very basic stuff, but it showed people skills, and it showed that I was able to tackle juggling education and work at the same time. Any public speaking, so that can be sort of negotiation, general public speaking. Has your old job, perhaps you're a career changer and your old job is relevant to that here. Pro bono and voluntary speaks for itself, and other skills. So languages are a really good one to include, because it shows that you'll have a wider client base, and any other skills that you've gained as well, which also may link to interests. Don't leave out your interests. I have done martial arts for around 16 years now, and every single application I wrote for Pupillage had a Taekwondo example in it, because not only was it a unique selling point that I was a black belt in Taekwondo, it also showed that I had the fighting spirit, I was determined, I was driven, I was able to get knocked down and stand back up again, things like that. all cross apply. So think about your hobbies, think about your interests, think about things that basically tell them a little bit about you, but also can be cross related to the bar, and all of that should be there as your evidence ready to use. Now, once you've had a look at your CV, one thing I found really helpful was to go through it with a red pen, print it out and sort of circle different things and write what attribute as a barrister that shows, to try and get myself thinking about where was my advocacy skills, where was my ability to liaise with difficult people. Things like that can really get you thinking about which examples you're going to use for the questions. It's really important that for every single answer you give on a pupillage application form, you give a different thing about yourself. So don't use the same example again and again. So if they said to me, give us a time when you've shown strong advocacy, and I used refereeing in Taekwondo, for the next question where it says, give us a time when you've shown drive and determination, I wouldn't use Taekwondo again. I would need to use something different. So it's important to show them a lot of yourself in as much as possible in each question. So how do you determine what to use in different places? Well, this is going to be this side column here where it says make a list, what attributes and which are the strongest. If you've got a question on a pupillage application form, let's, for example, give us a what are the skills of an advocate? What are the main skills of an advocate? So we've got that question. How are we going to attack that? Well, let's make a list of all of the things that I've done that show the skills of an advocate. So let's choose 3 skills: confidence, persuasiveness, and analytical ability. I don't know. And then what 3 out of those 3 things, you're going to make a list from all your education, from all your scholarships, from all your public speaking, what things show those skills. And then once you've done that, you're going to choose the strongest example for showing that thing, and you're going to give them one. What I would say is, if they give you a general one, like what are the best skills of an advocate, always choose 3. Come in 3s or 4s if you want to, but the golden rule is everything comes in 3. So I would always give 3 examples if it was a general question. And then if they ask for, give us a time when you've done this, only give them a time. Don't give them 2. They don't want 2. They've asked you for 1. So it's important that you read the question properly and give them the strongest example of that one time, and make sure you're not repeating the same example again and again and again. So now you've done that, you should be ready to draft your answers. So what we're going to be doing here is sticking to the facts. So how you do that is by using evidence. Every single point you make needs evidence, and you'll be surprised at how easy it is to forget that and sort of make it all the way through a question and you've actually not given them any evidence. Don't be afraid to say, if they've asked for, if you put intellectual ability as an example and your way of showing that is that you achieved the top grade in a set examination, tell them that and tell them the top grade. Say it was 84% if it was 84%. So don't be afraid to use evidence. Lawyers love it. You want to rely on the evidence of all those things that you've done and not broad and brash claims. So I really like doing this. Okay, well, that's great, but what have you done that actually proves that you really like doing that? Every answer needs to be concise. Now, what I mean by this is that if they give you a word count, which they'll give you, say, 200 words to answer the question. 200 words is not a goal. They don't want you to write 200 words. They want you to write 150 that is really strong, really concise, and really succinct. So if you can say it in less, always write it in less. You don't need to be making 200 words if it's a 200 word question. You need to be sort of hitting 150 and making it really succinct. And know the gaps. So if you've missed something when you're proofreading, make sure you go back and fill it. If you know you've missed an area and you've not stuck to the facts, then definitely go back and address that. So I've got an example here of how you do it. Example, the top one is wrong. I am a passionate defender of women's rights. Well, that's fantastic, but we don't know why you're a passionate defender, and where's your evidence that you're a passionate defender of women's rights? Instead, you need to do the second example. Volunteering with the National Centre for Domestic Violence helped me understand the issues surrounding the plight of abused women. Another thing I wanted to highlight here while we're on the word passionate is don't use it in pupillage applications. That's my general advice. The most people I've spoken to and barristers that I've spoken to said that everyone's passionate. That doesn't actually help you establish anything. It's just an empty word, really. We're all passionate about it. That's why we're applying for pupillage. So what is it about you? So be wary of using the word passionate in pupillage applications. So how do you persuade? Well, I've already mentioned a few of these already when answering these questions, but you stay factual, you give them evidence, everything is justified. You are succinct and specific, so you don't waffle on, you don't give them lots and lots of backstory, you get straight to the point. And what I mean by this is if there's a question, say, what are the skills of the advocates? You would just go, there are 3 skills. Firstly, this, evidence. Secondly, this evidence. Thirdly, this evidence. They don't want what you do at undergraduate level, which is repeat the whole question, give them the backstory, and then tell them why. They want it very direct, very specific, very succinct. Sorry, I was nearly sneezing then. Avoid repetition. Again, I've said this before, you're not persuading them if you're giving them the same evidence again and again and again. Give them something different every single time. And with that comes with confidence of selling yourself. If you don't believe in what you're typing and what you're saying, then they're not going to believe it. So it's really important that you present yourself in the best light possible. So how do you get to the point? Well, my biggest thing is use active verbs. I really struggled with this when I started. I just used to waffle on and on and on, and I think my history undergraduate probably didn't help with that, because I used to like to expand on everything rather than just tell them what they wanted to hear. So you need to use active verbs. So it's things like, I understood this from seeing this. I observed in a Crown Court the advocacy of an advocate, and this showed me how to cross-examine effectively. I drafted this piece of written advice and received feedback stating it was excellent. I researched the elements of RASO cases in the Magistrates Court and understood this, and therefore would like to practice in this area. All of those things are really good examples of how you get straight to the point and you tell them what you did. They don't want to know what other people did. They don't want to know about everything else you did around it. They want to know exactly what you did and what outcome that was. So we've got a really good example here again of this. I was given the opportunity to contribute to the findings of a project by researching French immigration law. Now, it's not completely wrong, but it's rather waffly, when instead we could just say, my research into French immigration law contributed to the project findings. And sometimes what I found was example 1 was what I originally had. So my first draft of the pupillage applications were always very similar to the top example. And then when I went and proofread it through and had friends look over it too, I very quickly fell into drafting the latter of the 2 there. So this one's rather short because it's just on pupillage applications, and I wanted to give you a chance to actually ask a lot of questions, because I know most people have lots of questions about pupillage, and I would rather open the floor to questions if anyone does have any about it. But my 6 final tips are, number 1, your application will be read as a whole. So you need to make 1 point once, make it well, make it direct, and bear in mind that it will only be marked and read once by that person, so it needs to make an impact. Your unique selling point is going to be really important there. Mine was Taekwondo. Mine was that. I thought that would make me stand out and hopefully get me a bit of a name as, you know, fighter girl. If they didn't remember anything else about me, they'd perhaps remember that. So do try and think about the unusual things that make you who you are. Do not try and fit the mold if that's not you. Don't sell them a fake story, sell them the accurate version of yourself. I take mass pride in knowing that I came to this process really transparent. I always was really honest. If that's not the answer they wanted in interviews, if that's not the answer they wanted on paper, then I'm just not right for them. And as competitive as it is, you have got to sort of put yourself first and realize, you know, at the end of the day, you want to be at a chambers that you're really happy with, and that will accept you. And part of that process is just being an authentic version of yourself and hoping that that's enough. So don't try and fit the mold if that's really not who you are. Thirdly, your written application is just the first step. It's to get you in the door and make you someone that interesting that they actually want to speak to. So that means that you will be challenged in interview on things you've written in your application. So you need to use things that you're happy and comfortable to talk about in person, because if you used an example from really long time ago that you can't remember really anything about, but you think it sounds quite compelling, be warned, that's probably the thing they're going to ask you about in interview, because they know it was a long time ago, and they want to see if you actually remember it. So definitely make sure you include things that will make them want to speak to you, but make sure you also include things that you can actually justify and speak about when you get into the interview room. Fourthly, don't leave out interesting things because you think it's not legal or not relevant. You do need to make those points still. They are more interesting and they will be legal and relevant in a way that you probably won't realize. Again, I go back to my retail example. I worked on a dockyard as well, dealing with the ships and stuff and things like that. So again, I was able to work in tough weather conditions and things like that. I was able to go outside and commute in the rain and stuff to my job, and all of that shows determination and drive. And at the bar, it's not always easy. And other things will cross relate. So just really think about what you've done that will also be skills and attributes to becoming a barrister. Know your chambers. Yes, they don't want a copied and pasted answer to why do you want to come to our chambers. They will know if it's a copied and pasted answer. You need to do the research. You need to find out what it is specifically about them that you like. You need to justify it as much as you can by using perhaps a case that you've read up on that is one that they've done, or an event you've attended for that chamber. So have you attended their pupillage evening? Have you done a mini pupillage? Whatever it is, you need to make sure you have a way of knowing that chambers, and you can give them an authentic answer to why you want to be with them. And then it goes without saying, I wouldn't have got pupillage without the University of Law's employability services, and I'm sure you have a fantastic employability service at university as well. So any employability service that you have, please use if you're making pupillage applications. It's paramount to have someone else look at your work and have them proofread it. I would say in a really sticky situation had any of my sort of first and second drafts gone in without someone proofreading. So spelling, grammar, punctuation, all of that needs to be absolutely flawless by the time it gets put and sent into the pupillage gateway. So make sure you do it, and definitely utilize your friends or your family, whoever it might be, get them all to read your pupillage applications, because they'll all spot something different. And then if you're successful, this is what the pupillage year looks like. I won't spend too long on this because I think we've recapped it before in becoming a barrister, but it'll be 12 or 18 months long, depending on where you secure a pupillage. Your first 6 will be non-practicing, so shadowing your pupil supervisor. Your second 6, you'll be on your feet, so you'll still be under supervision, very much like driving with your L plates or your bicycle with stabilizers on. You're doing it, but you're being supported with doing it. And then at the end of your second 6, you'll either make an application for tenancy and that will be accepted, or you will make another application to an alternative set and you will do another third 6 there. Why am I telling you this? Because when you go in, it's really important to understand actually what pupillage is, because if you don't understand what you're going to be doing, then you're not going to be able to persuade them that they want you. So it's important to always think about the business side of it, that you're going to be self-employed. Are you going to be able to bring revenue in for chambers? Are you going to be able to handle your own caseload? Are you going to be able to liaise well with solicitors and get the work in? All of that's going to be really important to showing that in your second 6. So it's about being wary of what you're actually going to be doing on the pupillage year, what's going to be expected of you, the commitment, the level of research, the fact that you are going to be really stressed at times. How are you going to cope with that? Those sort of things, they're all really important. And I do think when you go in to draft these applications, definitely think about the job that you're doing at the end of it and how you're gonna best perform in that role. So I just wanted to also highlight that if anyone is thinking about going down the criminal bar route, we do have our next event, which is Advocacy Series Part 2 coming up, which is going to be focusing on plea mitigations. I'm also highlighting this because the selection process at ULaw involves a plea mitigation. So it's a fantastic opportunity to learn more about plea mitigations and get your head around that if you are planning to join us. And it's going to basically be really, really helpful as well if you are perhaps in a lucky position of making pupillage applications and you've got a final round interview. Commonly at criminal sets, they often ask for you to do an advocacy exercise, either a plea mitigation or a bail application. So Advocacy Series Part 2 is going to be focusing in on how you would effectively do that plea mitigation. So do come along if you're available, and the link is law.ac.uk/events. So that's all from me in terms of presentation, but I'm now going to open the floor up to some questions. So if anyone does have any questions, do feel free to put them in the chat. I'm happy to answer anything about the interview process as well as the applications, although this talk was predominantly focused on applications. I'm happy to answer any questions about that as well if you have them. So we've had a question come in just now. Do chambers favour straight law students over graduate conversions? Absolutely not. No. I did history at undergraduate level and then did my conversion. And I got more interviews than some people who did LLB. So it's nothing to do with that at all. It's about what you have done externally, I would say, more than anything. So like the pro bono work you've done, the volunteering, the minis, the mooting, your interest in the law, what have you done to really show that, rather than your undergraduate degrees and things. What I would say is everyone's got a degree. Everyone's done a law degree or a law conversion. They've got it at a 2-1 or a first most of the time. And yeah, that's it. That's as far as it goes. They're not really worried about it other than that. I think I've already addressed this at the beginning, but yeah, you should be able to access the recordings of these. I've sent them all to your the people I've been liaising with at Warwick. So again, they should make that available to you. What is something that tends to be ill or misunderstood about pupillage? Can you elaborate a bit? What do you mean by ill or misunderstood? I'm a tad, that's quite a broad question. Do you mean in the context of the actual pupillage in itself, like when you're on the pupillage, or the process of which, so interviews or paper sifts, things like that? I'm happy to answer you, Ingrid, but I think I need a bit more on that one to help answer that question. When are mini pupillage deadlines? Usually they aren't really any deadlines. Chambers tend to take them on a rolling basis, so it's just a case of checking Chambers websites frequently to see if they're taking any applications for minis. If they're not, then they're not, and if they are, they are. So it's a bit of a game. You just need to know sort of the sets that you would like to shadow and keep checking on their websites under the mini pupillage section, and that's usually in the join us bit or pupillage, and then under that it will say mini pupillage. Ingrid, I'm not sure. Yeah, okay. It means to tell people applying for pupillage that anything that crops up often that they misunderstand about what they will end up doing in the role. I think it depends on the area you're going into. I can only speak really from a criminal perspective. I think a lot of the time, I would say the mistake that I definitely learned really quickly was that I was making this case for like wanting to do RASO work and like these sort of the big areas of crime, when that's not what I'm going to be doing. So it's about not misunderstanding what you're going to be doing at the junior end of the bar. You need to accept that the junior end is very different to when you get to QC status. So I think it's about being realistic as to the role you're actually moving into as a pupil. So that was why I sort of emphasised it earlier. I'd done my applications again this year, although I did well, I probably would have taken out the emphasis on RASO so much. I would have made it a good thing, but not the thing that I kept saying, you know, I want to be at your chambers because you specialise in sexual offence crimes, and I did RASO, which is great, but I'm not going to be doing that for years. So I think, yeah, be careful with that. Again, I think in general, what I would say about certain areas of the bar, in particular the criminal bar, is not always, it's not like suits glamour that you see on TV. I think there's a general misunderstanding about that as well, that you're going to get paid a lot of money, that you're going to get, you know, you're self-employed, you can take lots of time off whenever you want. The reality of that's very different, particularly at the criminal end of the spectrum. I went to numerous talks to try and educate myself on that, because they like to see that you understand what you're getting yourself in for, and that you're not naive to that. You know, the minis I've shadowed and done, I definitely saw days where barristers, you know, I spoke to barristers in the robing room who were very much like, I've paid to come to work some days, because by the time I've taken out all the costs, I've actually not earned a huge amount. So self-employment is one of the biggest things, and you do need to show that you're willing to like build basically your own revenue, and that's always forgotten. And you need to, I would just say, be aware of the business acumen side of it more so. That's not me saying go in and be like, you know, I'm going to earn lots of money and I'm going to do this by doing this, but just an understanding that you are self-employed and it is on you to bring in revenue for yourself. And that self-employment as well isn't always stable. Things like that are good for thinking about sort of how are you going to combat the current issues at the bar. There's always a question like that. And it's good to be really genuinely clued up in about what the realities of being a barrister in certain areas mean. I hope that helps. I hope that sort of answers your question. But yeah, it's the only way you can do it is definitely following what's going on in the area that you're interested in and the developments that are being made. I don't know what area of law you're interested in. Right, I'm going to stop the recording, and then if anyone else has any other last minute questions.